Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another character spotlight for Marvel's Contest of Champions. Today we have my favorite Marvel character, Doctor Strange. I've talked about this in several different Marvel-themed videos featuring this character. In the past, he's just really awesome and has a ton of very unique and engaging source material. That being said, the Contest of Champions representation of this character has been absolutely gutted and is not a fair representation of the character at all. Sure, he has some unique functions and works very different from other members of the cast, but he used to be much better and could probably even be made much stronger than what he already is. So strap in, because we're going to talk about how he currently functions and several pitches of mine as to how this character could be made much better than they currently are. So Doctor Strange works in a couple of different ways, unique to basically the entire rest of the cast. The biggest item that is unique to him is he does not gain power from attacking into his opponents or receiving attacks from those opponents, like almost every other cast member does. Instead, he gains 100% of a bar of power every 9 seconds, which matches up with the rotating buffs that he has, and that means that he will passively fill that power over time, which does render him fairly weak to petrified debuffs and power lock, which isn't super great for him. However, it's not really the end of the world because he has a lot of other applications that work really well in his favor. Speaking of which, Doctor Strange will invoke 3 different Vishanti blessings on himself, which manifest in the form of buffs, and each of those last for a 9-second duration and have the following effects. First off, there is Ashtur's Refuge, which grants increased armor and block proficiency for 9 seconds and is represented by the shield buff icon. Secondly, there is Agamotto's Insight, which grants increased attack and critical hit rate, again for 9 seconds, and is represented by a Fury buff icon. And the third is Hogoth's Wisdom, which grants an additional 16% increase to the power gain rate that Doctor Strange has, more particularly when hitting into his opponents, and will cause Doctor Strange to regenerate a minuscule amount of health on each successfully landed attack over that 9-second duration, and the icon representing that looks similar to a power gain buff, though it doesn't allow him to passively gain that increased power as it works for other characters. So those are the biggest rotation things that you'll need to see, and instead of referring to them as their full names, I'll just kind of talk about the icons themselves where they're relevant for the special attack 2, which we'll cover in just a moment. Now, Doctor Strange's special attacks aren't super crazy. The first one is fairly easy to evade, kind of difficult to punish, to come back in and attack into your opponents at, but it can be done. It just creates a lot of spacing with the initial hit and then the follow-up projectile enchantment that is thrown out. And if the attack lands successfully, it deals up to 100% additional damage and allows you to recover up to 100% of the power used for this ability, but it's not a guarantee. As a matter of fact, you can get kind of hosed by using this ability over and over again because you more often than not don't even regain the power that you used in order to fire off the special one. So really not the best option in Doctor Strange's kit, can be used in a pinch. The special 2 attack is a couple of blasts that will erupt from underneath your opponent, and those are fairly difficult to dodge, though it's not impossible. It can be done if you're particular on the timing, and more specifically, you need to get a bit of an early dexterity evade off of the first hit, and then immediately do a second, and then just be familiar with the delayed timing on that last strike as Doctor Strange throws that out. But it is a little bit more difficult in a more of an advanced evasion technique, so just kind of be sensitive to that if you're trying to get away from those attacks. And depending on what blessing is active on Doctor Strange, he will have a chance to do a couple of different things on each strike of the attack. Under the defense armor up blessing, he has a 50% chance to inflict weakness on the opponent with every strike, which will decrease the target's attack power by 15%. For 10 seconds per debuff. The Fury blessing has a 50% chance to apply a decent armor break to the opponent, again, that lasts for a 10-second duration. And the power gain health regeneration buff has a 50% chance to nullify a buff off of the opponent. But there are better ways that Doctor Strange can get rid of buffs on his target. Namely, in the form of the Special 3, which is a 100% chance to apply a Fate Seal to the opponent, which removes all buffs from the opponent and prevents additional buffs from being activated for 5 seconds after the attack has been carried out. And this can be quite powerful if you have characters that are highly reliant on buffs, such as most cosmic characters, and pairs really nicely with the Mystic Dispersion, where you can gain a certain amount of power per buff nullified off of your opponent if you choose to apply over into that mastery. Now, the only other thing in Doctor Strange's kit that is significant is his signature ability, which is fairly powerful, but also kind of removes the circumstances where you would ever use the Special 3. Basically, Doctor Strange will carry out a counter spell passively. It's not like you have to hold block or anything else in order for this to activate. He will just passively perform a counter spell that at its maximum potency has an 80% chance to remove a buff off of your target, and it will just kind of do that within the first 2 seconds or so of the buff being active. And 80% is pretty nice, all things considered, when it comes to preventing a buff from taking place. Now, previously, Doctor Strange was a lot stronger. His armor break debuffs off of that Special 2 were a lot more powerful, and more particularly, he used to heal for a percentage of the damage dealt instead of a base rating. And I understand to a point why that was changed, because it did make him a very survivable character and kind of overpowered, but at the same time, he just got nerfed into the ground and is no longer as viable as he once was, which is really kind of sad to see, especially because a lot of the newer characters that have those Petrify, Heal Block, and other abilities are a lot more prevalent now than they were at the time of the changes made to Doctor Strange. But instead of reverting him back to the way he was, I think that it would be in Doctor Strange's best interest to see a complete overhaul. I have my fingers crossed, most probably in vain, that we will see a rework to Doctor Strange take place before the Multiverse of Madness movie comes out next year. I expect that we're probably going to get a new quote-unquote better or cinematic universe version of Doctor Strange around that time. We'll just kind of have to see if that is the case. But for this version of Doctor Strange, I would like to see some new special attack animations. The Special 2 was really the biggest one that I had a concept for, and what I would really like to see happen there is to have a representation of the Crimson Bands of Sidorak. That is a very quintessential ability and attack that is used by Doctor Strange, where he will bind up the opponent, and I think that that would be an awesome spell to have represented on that Special 2, and you could even make the initial strike of it unblockable to the point where you have to be very particular on your evasion in order to get away from it, where it can just kind of weave it through that block, lock up the opponent, and then send them hurtling across the battlefield, or at least lock them in place to the point where Doctor Strange can get a significant follow-up. It could even functionally work similarly to Mr. Fantastic's Special 2 attack, where it locks the opponent in place until he rushes in and attacks further. Of course, Doctor Strange isn't going to be as elastic as Mr. Fantastic. That's not the illusion I'm going for. But in terms of locking up the opponent or locking down the opponent into complete vulnerability for a follow-up, I think that that would be really, really powerful. I also think that the blessings mechanic could be kind of overhauled, not as much to the point where they're on a random rotation, as much as it is something that you can kind of toggle on and off depending on either a heavy attack type application, lock-in, switch type thing, or maybe a combination of that with different special attacks that you choose to unleash, and really just kind of overhaul the way that the character works. I don't think that the power gain method that he has would need to be changed, altered, or overhauled really to any degree, but this character is just a lot more powerful than what this game represents, and I would love to see a more potent and powerful version of the Sorcerer Supreme in this game. And by Sorcerer Supreme, I don't mean Sorcerer Supreme the character, I mean Doctor Strange, the Sorcerer Supreme. Well, I guess there have been a couple, but the one that is most recognizable as being that Sorcerer Supreme. But what do you think? Do you think that there are changes that need to be made to Doctor Strange? Would you like to see him completely overhauled, or would you just like to see him reverted back to the way that he worked before? Be sure to let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. Be sure to leave a like on today's video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe for that daily variety content. Thanks again for your time, and I hope that you have an absolutely fantastic rest of your day.